All right, so your Bibles should be open to 1 Samuel chapter 1. Got the Bible there already. Logan. And then Shelby, you should find the material there, the worksheet. So, all right, lesson 93, the birth of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 1. This is still happening during the time of the end of the Judges, and right before the time of the rule of the kings. Okay, so we'll read a little bit about the family that Samuel is going to be born into. What's it like? The Bible tells us here. Chapter 1, verse 1. Now, there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. Just leave the candy now and there. No. And he had two wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? For am I not better to thee than 10 sons? We'll stop there. So this is the family that Samuel is going to be born into. Probably one of the first things that jumps out at you is this is a man with two wives. At first, you might think, not a godly family. Two wives, it's disobeying God's law. But then as we read on, we see it's not necessarily the case. This Elkanah takes time every year. He's dedicated to the Lord. He travels one time every year to Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle is, to sacrifice to the Lord. So he's a faithful, godly man we see there because of that. More than likely what's going on here as we continue to read that one of the wives, Peninnah, had many children, and the other wife, Hannah, had none. Similar to Leah and Rachel. But in this instance, more than likely, it would be my guess, that Elkanah first married Hannah. It was very important in those days to have a child of God to pass along your land and your name to. It was a picture of having a name and a place in the promised land. So without that, it seemed as though you had no future, your family had no future. Again, we don't worry about that today. There are many who don't have children. It doesn't mean they have no place in the promised land. It's not true. Or in heaven. So what did Elkanah do? More than likely, because year after year after year, the womb of his wife Hannah was closed and she was not having children. Kind of similar to Abraham and Sarah. They tried to run things their own way. And so he went out and he found another woman and made her his wife as well, having two wives, which of course most people in the land wouldn't frown upon, being that they were living in wickedness with their heathen wives and probably multiple wives as well. And she bore him sons and daughters. So we see there is a difference between the two. And then Elkanah tries to make up for having his second wife. You can imagine being Hannah and thinking, boy, my husband married a second wife. Doesn't he love me? Doesn't he care about me? That he needs a second wife? Am I not enough? Elkanah himself probably feeling guilty at having married a second wife and knowing that it's wrong and knowing how it makes his wife feel sad. We see he does something, although trying to make the situation better, in reality it only makes the situation worse. And he gives to Hannah a double portion. So if we're talking about food here, like Joseph giving his brothers to test them with their jealousy, he goes and takes a scoop of potatoes and puts it on the plate of Peninnah and each of her children. But when he gets to Hannah, 2 scoops. Knowing we live in a time of great abundance, food was precious. You didn't waste it. I guarantee you they didn't scrape off anything they didn't like or taste into the garbage, but they ate it all. It was very precious. They had to work very hard to get that food. And so for one person to get a little bit extra was something that was going to draw the attention of the others, and that's exactly what it did. Peninnah and her children were jealous of Hannah. So rather than, even though Elkanah probably is trying to make amends here and try to show Hannah how much he loves her, in reality he's making it that much worse. He's making it that much worse for his first wife. Creates jealousy. Now also at this time, we read there, when he would visit Shiloh, we read of a few other people. We're just being introduced to them because they'll come up in later lessons. But we read of the priest. His name is Eli. And his 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Keep those stored up in your memory bank. We'll be coming to those guys and have a lesson on them here shortly. So, having disobeyed God's law, having tried to run ahead of God, Elkanah here has children with his wife, Peninnah. It doesn't make the situation any better. In fact, it makes it worse. That's why we see the word provoked there. So she provoked her. It means Peninnah probably had every chance she would get. She knew she was not as well loved. She knew the only reason that she had a position in that family was to bear children to Elkanah. She probably wasn't favored by him at all. In fact, she probably didn't get as much as she wanted. So she too is jealous, and so every time she'd walk past Hannah, you can imagine her calling her names. Childless, barren, making sure she used all the adjectives to describe her before saying her name or whatever, just so she know just how to provoke Hannah, and that wasn't good. So we see Elkanah trying to say, look, I'm trying to take care of you. I've given you more than Peninnah and her children. Here you are weeping. I try to treat you better than 10 sons, which he probably does. But the problem is he's married a second wife. He should have been content with the Lord's plan. He should have been content with loving Hannah. But he wasn't. So let's look at verse 9. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. So this is probably the morning. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by the post of the temple of the Lord. So he's probably watching people coming and going and speaking to them. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. So, we see something going on here. Hannah, after speaking with her husband, probably leaving wherever it is, they probably carried their tents with them because they had tents like we camp in, we think of, probably pitched outside the city of Shiloh because they're visiting there. And after having this discussion, bit of an argument with her husband, she's disappointed in him, and she goes out of the tent with a sad and sorrowful spirit. And where does she go? She goes to the proper place, the place that you and I should go when we have a sorrowful spirit. She goes directly to the house of God. And there she prays to Him, pouring out her soul to Him, bringing to God her needs, her desires, her wants. That is how we should behave. What a beautiful example Hannah is here of what happens when you become maybe upset or frustrated with parents or situations or whatever it may be. Go to your room and pour out your heart before the Lord. You'll find that solves a lot of problems. So that's what Hannah did. She goes there, and she's observed by Eli, the high priest. He sees her, and he marks her mouth, meaning he watches it, because here she sits, speaking, lips moving, but no words coming out. She prayed from her heart. We do that from time to time. You probably are thinking about things to yourself, maybe what you're going to say or what you're going to do, or trying to explain to yourself, or having a disagreement with yourself, or an argument with yourself, or discussing how things are happening, and you talk in your head, but yet your lips move. And that's what Eli noticed, and he thought, now, I can't have this type of woman in the temple here, or tabernacle. She's a drunkard. Look at her. Look at her. I can see how weary she is. I can see mumbling of words. She can't even speak clearly. She's so drunk. And so he goes up to her, accusing her of being a drunk woman. And she says, no, my Lord, it's my spirit. I've got a spirit, but not filled with wine. I've got a spirit filled with sorrow. And I'm pouring out my heart before the Lord, because this is what I desire of the Lord. And I want Him to know what I need. Eli, being corrected and standing corrected before her, now knowing what is going on, he speaks to her. Okay? He says, he doesn't tell necessarily what's going to happen, but he says to her, go in peace. The God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of Him. So she prayed this silently, and we see that. Now, some other things, though, we should notice in there. What did Hannah promise to the Lord? Lord, first of all, she didn't request a child. She requested a man-child. Child that would carry on the name of the Lord, but also it was not the place of the women to work in the tabernacle. That was a place given to the men. And she wanted to take her son and offer him to the Lord, that she would dedicate him. Lord, even though he's my son who's born to me, I will give him to you. You can use him how you like. And so that's what she asked for, a man-child. And she knows what the rules of the Nazirite are, and she promises, Lord, if you give me a man-child, I will never allow a razor to touch his head. I will never cut his hair. She probably doesn't have to worry about strong drink or unclean food. She doesn't eat those in the godly house of Elkanah. So she makes that promise to the Lord. Now, why else might Eli think that there would be a drunk woman in the tabernacle? Unfortunately for Eli, the two sons that we mentioned, we'll see a little bit more, they're wicked sons. They're not sons who love the Lord. In fact, they're much like Samson. They're sons who loved different women. And they would often bring probably those drunken women home with them into the tabernacle. And it would be Eli's job to get them out of there. More than likely, he's used to seeing a drunken woman there because he has to shoo her out because of the sins and wickedness of his sons, Hophni and Phinehas. So what happens? What's the results? Eli tells her to go in peace. He prays that the Lord will grant her wish, her petition. So she did. We read, she went her way, did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. This had given her joy. What is the result? Verse 19. And they rose up in the morning early, that's Elkanah, Peninnah, Hannah, and the children, and worshipped before the Lord, so probably one more time, go to the tabernacle, and returned. So they went home, and came to the house in Ramah, and Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about, after Hannah had conceived, and she bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and vow. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned. Then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. And Elkanah her husband said unto her, Do what seemeth thee good. Tarry until thou hast weaned him. Only the Lord establish his words. So the woman abode, and gave him her son suck until she had weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh, and the child was young. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition, which I have asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshipped the Lord there. God answers prayers. Prayers that are from the heart, that are wholehearted in that way. Might not always be the answer we want. But in this case, God answers Hannah's prayer in the way that she desires. And the Lord gives unto her a son. They go back home. She becomes pregnant. 9 months later, she bears a son. She names him Samuel. A beautiful name, meaning the Lord has given him to me. Okay? The Lord has answered her prayers. So she cares for him. And now, before he's 1 year old, it's time once again, with Elkanah, Peninnah, and the children, to go to the tabernacle, as they do each year, make their annual pilgrimage. And here, for the first time, Hannah says, No, my husband, I won't go. I've promised this child to the Lord, and I can't bring him in this state. He needs to be old enough. He needs to be 4, 5, 6 years old. He needs to walk. He needs to talk. He needs to learn obedience. He needs to be able to understand so that he can learn about the Lord. My husband, you go. Go with Peninnah and the children. I will stay home. And when this child, Samuel, is old enough to do all those things, then I will go with you again. And then we'll bring him, because once I take him back to the tabernacle, to the Lord, I must leave him there forever. Imagine your parents doing that to you. What would you think as a child? The only people you've known and loved dropping you off. Don't they love you? No. Hannah loved her child with just as much love as your parents love you. But she had made a promise to the Lord, and she knew that this was a gift from God, and that God had a special purpose for her son. So she's willing to do that. So we see that there. So when he's finally old enough, they take him. They go and offer sacrifices at the tabernacle. She brings him to Eli and reminds him, Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying to the Lord for a child. He's answered my prayer, and here is my son. I have promised him to God, and in the service of the Lord he shall remain. So I give him to you. So how was he trained and taught, being such a young child? Well, the Lord took care of that. Probably through the faithful teaching of Eli, through the faithful teaching of the other people, the workers and families, probably the Levite families. He probably was taken in by one of those Levite families who lived there in the tabernacle, who took care of all the little things that had to go on so that the priests could do their job each day. And he probably went and was cared for by some of them. And in that instance, then, he learned the ways of the Lord. He knew exactly how to behave. And in that way, God blessed him. So the Lord made sure here that Samuel will be properly trained. He will know the Bible stories. He will know the history of Israel. He will know what the Lord wants and what the written word up until this point says. And so we see what a beautiful name, the name of Samuel. Difficult situation for a family. Not one that we would be in, I'm sure you can think of, and I asked you that on your sheets. Or situations where you've been jealous. You've wanted something else that someone else has. Or you looked at, I wish I could be like them. Or I wish I could have this like they do. They're sins. We all do it. I do it. You do it. Your parents do it. We fall into that sin. We shouldn't. But we can learn that from here too. And sometimes when we think we're making situations better, Mom and Dad have probably told you that before. Just stop. Just stop, they say. You're making it worse. Maybe what you're talking about, you're trying to explain something away. No, just stop. You're making it worse. Or maybe you're working on something and you're trying to help and you just don't understand. No, you're making it worse. Just please stop. Okay? That's the same here. Elkanah tried to make things better, ended up making them worse and building up that jealousy. So we can remember those few things about this lesson. Remember, parents tell you to stop, or some situation you're just making it worse, just stop. Be careful of our jealousy, and also be careful. We too need to serve the Lord. We should give our lives to the Lord just as we see Samuel here. That would be a beautiful encouragement for some of you. Again, especially young men, that's a way that you could give your life to the Lord. Think about becoming ministers. Pray about being a minister. You might think you don't have the talents and abilities and skills, but you could probably ask most of our ministers, and they all thought that when they were younger. And they trusted in the Lord, and the Lord gave them the talents and abilities and skills. So that's a way that we can dedicate our lives to the Lord too, in addition to many other ways. Being mothers in the home, caring for children there is a great way to dedicate our lives to the Lord. So think of those things. They're important things, and they're important ways that we can do that too.